Seven Dwarfs. On a winter's day many years ago, a queen sat sewing at her palace window. Through the window, framed in black ebony, she saw the gleaming white snow. Suddenly, the queen pricked her finger, and 3 tiny drops of blood appeared. I wish I had a baby, thought the queen, with skin as white as snow, lips as red as this blood, and hair as black as the ebony of the window frame. Soon after, her wish came true. A lovely little daughter. A few years later, the queen died, and the king married again. The new queen was very proud and vain. She thought herself the most beautiful woman in the world. She had a magic mirror, and every day she would look into it and ask,
"Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?"
And the mirror would reply,
"Thou art the fairest, my lovely queen."
But as Snow White grew up, she became more and more lovely. Soon she became more beautiful than the queen, her stepmother. One day the queen stood as usual before her mirror and asked,
"Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?"
This time the mirror answered,
Thou art very fair, my queen, but none can compare to Snow White.
The stepmother queen flew into a rage. Okay.
All right, I just faded out.
To the queen.
She called one of the king's huntsmen to her and said,
"Okay, huntsman, go and take Snow White out to the woods and bring her heart back in this bowl so that I know that you have obeyed me."
Oh, buddy.
Okay, take Cassie's hand.
To the woods.
But when they reached the forest, the huntsman could not bear to kill the lovely girl. "Run away and hide," he said to Snow White. Then he killed the wild animal and took its heart back to the wicked queen.
Wonderful.
Snow White, left in the forest, was very scared. She met a little deer who helped her find a little cottage where she knew she could sleep and find food. Snow White knocked on the door, and when there was no answer, she opened the door and went in. There she saw a little table neatly set with 7 white little cups and saucers. Along the wall, there were 7 little beds. They looked so inviting that Snow White lay down in one of the beds and fell sound asleep.
All the door. Oh dear.
This was the home of the 7 dwarfs.
I'm happy.
I'm sleazy.
Dopey.
I'm sleepy.
I'm Doc. I'm bashful.
I'm grumpy.
Soon they returned home from the mountains. When they lit the candles, they saw Snow White asleep on the bed. "How beautiful she is," they said softly, so as not to disturb her, and they let her sleep there until morning. The next day, the 7 dwarfs crowded around Snow White. "Who are you?" they asked, "and how did you get here?"
CPR.
Snow White told the dwarfs about her wicked stepmother and how the huntsman had spared her life. "Now I am without a home," she said. Would you like to live with us?" asked the dwarfs. "You could sew and mend and keep everything tidy." This made Snow White very happy. "Oh, thank you," she said. "I could want nothing better." So she stayed and took care of the home of the dwarfs. Off in the palace, the stepmother thought that Snow White was dead, but one day she went to her mirror as usual and asked,
"Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?"
The mirror answered,
You, my lady queen, are most fair, but none to Snow White can compare. She lives now in a forest glen with 7 little men.
She's supposed to be dead.
Okay.
The queen was furious. She decided to kill Snow White herself. Taking off her palace gown, she dressed herself as a peddler woman. She set out for the forest with a basket of fruit on her arm. In the basket was a fine rosy apple filled with magic poison. When she came to the cottage, the wicked stepmother, found Snow White at the window darning a sock.
Hello, pretty maid. I have some apples to sell.
She held up the shiny red apple that was poisoned. The 7 dwarfs had warned Snow White not to let anybody in while they were away at the mountains. So she said, I cannot let you in, but the apple looked so fresh and inviting that she reached out and took it. No sooner than she had taken the first bite that she fell on the floor in a dead faint. The stepmother laughed as she hurried back through the woods. Now I am the fairest in the land, she said to herself. Hey, how are we going to do the glass case?
Hi-ho, hi-ho, it's off to work we go. Hi-ho, 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 hi-ho.
It was a sad sight that met the dwarfs when they returned to the cottage. Their beloved Snow White was lying quiet and still on the floor. They wept, but try as they might, they could not bring her back to life. Snow White looked so beautiful that the dwarfs decided to place her in a glass case. Then they carried her to a hilltop where they took turns keeping watch.
Hey, are you putting her above or?
One day, a handsome prince from a far country rode by. He looked at the lovely girl in the glass case and fell in love with her. He begged the dwarfs to take Snow White with him.
I can't live without her.
He pleaded. The dwarfs gave their consent. As the prince lifted the case, the piece of poisoned apple fell out of Snow White's lips. She came to life again and sat up. How did I get here? And who are you? She said to the prince. The prince and the dwarfs were overcome with joy. Snow White and the prince were married and they lived happily ever after. The end.
Bye.
Come on.
Okay, say when.
When?
Ben.
The cast of characters was Grandpa Roberts as Dopey, Charity as Sleepy, Linda as Doc, Mark as Grumpy, Brian as Sneezy, Ben as the Woodsman, Grandma as Happy, Tracy as Bashful, and the Magic Mirror, Mary as the Mother, Laura as the Wicked Stepmother, Sophie and Caleb as the Woods Animals, and Huck as the Prince, and Cassie Roberts as Snow White.
And the narrator.
Was Paige Holly,
And Carl.
and the cameraman was Carl Willis.
Hello.
Foot off. Take your foot off. Take your foot off. There. Yeah, leave it right there. Right there. Don't put your foot on the rock. Ben,
Cassie.
take your foot off of it, honey.
Cassie.
You done with it, Caleb? You want it?
Well, Cassie.
This is the little cast that Ben and Cassie made for Grandma and Grandpa. It says, I love you, and it says Cassie and Ben.